Yo, fuck nuts! It's probing time.
Now, I usually try to stay out of this particular realm of the conspiracy land and that type of stuff. You know, I'll research it, read into it, that type of stuff. But it's not really something I think usually worth doing any type of video on and stuff. But yesterday, the Trump administration ordered another release of information on UFO files, which are now being classified as UAP files to make you think it's something different. Something like unexplained abnormal phenomenon or something like that is the new term they're going for. And over the last 24 hours here, people have gone through the files that have been released, and quite frankly, it's a giant, massive fucking nothing burger, at least what's been released so far. So far, the videos that have been released that people have examined, most of them apparently had been debunked years ago by UFO researchers themselves. Ones that found to be lens flares and lots of other things, anything other than an actual UFO, things that could be explained away. Then there's also really cryptic FBI reports and other things. You know, it's not the information that you probably hope it is. It isn't the real files on Roswell, New Mexico. It isn't the real files on Rendlesham Forest in England. It's a distraction, plain and simple. But I think, there's really two things going on because of information that came out over the last week before the release on Friday, things you guys may not be aware of. Now, starting around Monday or Tuesday this last week, and today is Saturday, May 9th. So let's go back to the 3rd, May 3rd, May 4th. There started to be talk in alternative media and on the conspiracy webs. And they were talking about, they were hearing that representatives of the White House and the State Department had been meeting with the major church leaders in the United States and in Europe, primarily the Vatican. If you haven't noticed, Marco Rubio has gone to the Vatican several times over the past few weeks. And there's also been other representatives from the State Department at the Vatican. They've been there quite a bit the last few weeks. And the word came out, according to alternative media, and this does include Alex Jones. He's the one who's cited the most on this, but there's others who have been getting this info too. The word is these members of the government were meeting with Christian church leaders, telling them that the White House was getting ready to declassify UFO files that will shake Christianity to its knees. That could see the almost dissolution of the Christian church. And as Benjamin Harris, I think his name is, over on InfoWars was saying yesterday evening when I listened to some of his broadcasts as he talked on this, he pointed out that the State Department hadn't talked to leaders of other churches. You know, they hadn't talked to, Islamic leaders. They hadn't talked to Jewish leaders or Hindu leaders or Buddhists. It's just Christians telling Christians that Christianity will be brought to its knees by these releases. Rather interesting. So the talk was in alternative media that, there's going to be this information that's going to come out whatever it is, it's going to be anti-Christian. Well, then yesterday we had what the White House said is the first release of information on these files. And now more is to come. And the information they released is old stuff, with the vast majority of it having been debunked by the UFO community for a very long time. So, not really earth-shattering, not religion-shattering. But people have been, especially over the last 24 hours, pointing out that this is nothing new. Nothing that wasn't expected or anything like that. Isn't the bombshell information that people had been getting warned about, that church leaders were being warned about. So they're discussing, well, why was this information being released? And predominantly people believe it's a distraction, it's a psyop to get us to focus on, hey, look at what my left hand is doing. Don't watch what my right hand is doing. So they're trying to distract us from something else. What exactly? I don't know. We'll find that out over the next week to 2 weeks, most likely, because they've had the opposite effect of what they intended. People are now laser focused on every little bit of news that's coming out of the government right now to find out what it is they're trying to cover up. My guess is, personally, I think this was being planned for release because things have not gone that well with Iran. And I'll point out to you, for those of you that say, oh yeah, we've defeated Iran, Trump said so. Trump said, what, 30 some times over the last 80 some days that this war's been going on, that Iran's been defeated and we're just waiting for an unconditional surrender, which hasn't happened. So the whole thing of Iran is totally defeated and they're demoralized and they're going to give up at any time, that's what you call propaganda. Okay, it's bullshit. It's meant to drum up patriotism at home and cover up the realities of what's actually happening on the battlefield. And I watched a clip here a couple days ago from the guys over at the Unsubscribed podcast. And they were talking how everyone who doesn't believe Trump right now is a bunch of un-American idiots, that we've clearly defeated Iran because we've destroyed their air force, we've destroyed their tanks, you know, they're defeated as a country. Well, guys, I want to remind you of some things and some times where we've been told that before. How about 2001? Do you remember that time period? 2001, the U.S. military went to war against the Taliban because the Taliban was sheltering Al-Qaeda. So the U.S. Air Force and the Navy went in and they bombed the shit out of the military equipment the Taliban had. We blew up planes and helicopters, which the vast majority of them hadn't flown in over a decade since the Soviets left. We blew up their armor. We blew up their infantry fighting vehicles. We blew up their artillery pieces. We blew up their air defense systems that no longer had operational missiles for them. And then we said we defeated the Taliban. We went in with the help of the Northern Alliance and secured the country. Do you guys remember that? Supposedly completely defeated the Taliban 2001 because we destroyed their expensive military equipment. I got a question for you. Who controls Afghanistan right now? Is it the United States? Oh, no, it's not. It's the Taliban. That organization that was in charge of Afghanistan before 2001, they're in charge of it again. After we destroyed that military equipment, which really they weren't using anyway, They went into an insurgency and they outlasted the United States. So were they truly defeated when we destroyed their Air Force and their tanks? No. How about 2003? Remember this time period? Some of us remember it quite well. Little place called Iraq. The Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, and the Marines went in and, we destroyed the Air Force, which hadn't flown in years. Destroyed their tanks, destroyed their armored personnel carriers, destroyed their APCs, bombed their bases, which the troops weren't on anyway. They had already left. Did we totally defeat Saddam's regime after that campaign? Did they unconditionally surrender? I mean, George Bush came out and did a big press conference saying mission accomplished on an aircraft carrier, which he's been mocked for the last 20 years about that one. Oh, no, they weren't defeated, were they? Oh, no, they went into an insurgency, brought the United States in and our allies, and then started to kick the shit out of us for years. And we kicked the shit out of them back. But who controls Iraq right now? Is it the U.S. government? Or is it the veterans of that insurgency? Are they in control of Iraq right now? Need more examples? How about 1990s? Serbia. Whenever Slick Willie, also known as President Bill Clinton, got his dick caught in the sausage press and a new scandal was starting to come out, magically we had to bomb Serbia again because the Serbs were violating some UN order that they never agreed to. So we had to go through and we had to bomb the Serbs again. And there was actually a time for about a month when we were at war with Serbia, but not officially. We were bombing their military equipment, destroying their aircraft, which they weren't allowed to fly because of orders from the United Nations. We were bombing their tanks, bombing their infantry fighting vehicles, destroying their artillery pieces. And then after, the scandal had died down in the United States, then we had a ceasefire and we found out we didn't destroy even a tenth of what we thought we did because the Serbs had hidden most of it. They didn't care about the aircraft because, hey, they weren't allowed to fly it anyway. But we started seeing tanks started coming out of barns and from underneath piles of hay that had been piled up in the fields. And, some of our people started looking closer at these knocked out pieces of equipment that we supposedly hit over the previous 30 days. And we found out, hey, these were tanks that had literally been stripped of parts already. They were just shells left there in a field with a kerosene heater in the engine compartment to make us think that it was actually running. And those artillery pieces that we had been bombing the piss out of, for the most part, were telephone poles or trees that had been cut down and stripped and put on fake carriages made out of wood with old tires, covered with some really ratty old camo nets, which they really couldn't use anymore, so they didn't need them. And we, bombed that stuff. Yeah, that clearly after that bombing campaign, that's when Milosevic stepped down in Serbia, didn't he? Oh, no, he didn't. No, the Serbs still control their country, and yeah, no regime change there either. How about another one? Let's go back even further. How about the 1960s, 1970s? There was something going on then where we poured more bombs into a country in a year than were used in all of World War II combined around the world by the United States. Was that country defeated? Did we defeat North Vietnam by bombing the piss out of it? No, we didn't. No, they took over the South in 1975, and they're in control of the country now. So why the fuck, with a track record like this for the U.S. military, do we think we defeated Iran? Especially because there have been a lot of Iran advisors or analysts. They've been a threat for almost 50 years, but not a major threat. They've just been something off on the side, who pokes at you every once in a while. And these analysts have come out and they said that for the last 40 some years, the regime in Iran knew they could never go toe-to-toe with the United States, and they seen what we did in Iraq, they seen what we did in Afghanistan, they seen what we did in Yugoslavia, and they realized that the U.S. military would target, major pieces of military equipment. So what did they do for the last 40-some years? They tunneled underground. They also reinforced caves. And inside these tunnel systems and inside these caves are massive arsenals and also munitions factories. And they've stored inside these complexes massive caches of ammunition and weaponry of all types. Mortars, rockets, machine guns, rifles, pistols, submachine guns, landmines, bulk explosives, hand grenades, anti-aircraft missiles, anti-tank missiles. Anything and everything that they could possibly need to fight an insurgency against any occupier that would come into the country, such as the United States. So their military strategy for over 40 years has been to take massive hits on the stuff that's above ground, while their real military power was decentralized in small units across the country with massive supply caches. And since this war started, we've now found out that these tunnels and that stuff that they were making weren't all of them that small. Some of them were large enough to park multiple semi-truck sized vehicles in, which were converted civilian cargo trucks modified with containers on back that opened up, and then out of this container would rise a ballistic missile launcher. Stuff that with vastly better range and accuracy than the Scud missiles that Saddam used back in 91-92 era. So you really think Iran's been defeated? Maybe we're being distracted from that. Maybe we're not meant to look at that one to question when the Don comes out and tell us they've been totally defeated. They're ready to unconditionally surrender at any moment. I guarantee it. I'm just waiting for them to call and say it. Their oil and everything belongs to us. It's going to happen. I guarantee it. It's going to happen at any moment. I know this for truth because I am a military genius. You guys remember hearing something a couple days ago about the Iranians shooting at a couple of our destroyers? And it was completely unprovoked, according to the press. Well, what they didn't tell you, and this is in the international media, those two destroyers, after the ceasefire had run out, they tried pushing through the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians told them to turn around. This is a violation of the ceasefire agreement. If you do not turn around, we'll open fire. Well, they didn't turn around reportedly. And actually what these two destroyers did is they took up positions off a couple of Iranian islands where their military had encampments on. And reportedly the U.S. Navy started to shell those positions before the Iranians fired. The Iranians, after being shelled, then retaliated with drones and anti-ship missiles. Now, here in the United States, we're told that the Iranians, in an unprovoked attack, attacked two of our destroyers. That's not what's being said in the international press. Believe what you will. I don't know the truth behind the incident. I don't know if the Iranians did fire first or if we fired first. I wasn't there. And I haven't been in the Middle East for almost 20 years now. And I have no intention of going back. Maybe this release of alien information is to keep us from looking too closely at what's still going on in that area of the world. Or maybe it's because people are starting to talk about the Epstein files again. You ever notice that whenever people start talking about the Epstein files, Trump has to attack something, or he releases UFO files? He did that last year. For those of you that have the attention span of a goldfish, whenever people started talking and pushing about the Epstein files last year, the White House would release UFO files. Oh, and these are the great revelations which are proving that the UFOs are real. Right. And interesting how it's always happens when people are asking questions about Donald's friend Jeffrey. And we still got the cover-up, is the best way to describe it, going on, where we're supposed to believe that Donald was close friends with Jeffrey for about 20 years, but he somehow didn't know at all that Jeffrey was trafficking young girls to the Don. Oh, I mean, not to him. Even those mentioned in the files that have been released, which we're supposed to believe that, that's disinformation planted in there by the Democrats. Okay, whatever. Why wouldn't Jeffrey, who made billions blackmailing rich people, why wouldn't he have targeted the Don in the same operations? Especially since they knew each other for 20-some years. How would the Don not know about it? You ask yourself questions on this, or are you still going with the Don is the Cheeto-colored savior? We're supposed to believe that the Don was never tainted by the Jeffrey, that it was only the Don's other friends who Jeffrey targeted, that Jeffrey never, ever, ever tried doing anything to the Don because he just trusted him so much. Right. Interesting. It's almost like the situation with Netanyahu and Israel. Every time things start dying down and, the Israeli courts and the Israeli politicians are talking about it's time to arrest Netanyahu for corruption, magically something happens where, oh, sorry, I can't follow through with what you said. I got to stay in power till this crisis is over. Once we're done fighting off the attacks from this group over here that you never heard of before, then I promise I'll go to jail then. It's almost like Trump is following the same tactics. Almost, But why would the Trump do that every time that people start talking about the Jeffrey files? He's got to be really loyal to his friends to, go to war against how many countries? After he said he would never get us into another war again, he's gone to war against how many over the last year and a half? And is threatening to go to war against Cuba also? We're not supposed to tie it to the Jeffrey files, because every time people start bringing up questions on the Jeffrey files and pointing out that there's still information that has to be unredacted and released, because they're redacting the names of the perpetrators and not redacting the names of the victims, which is who we were told. That was why they waited so long on releasing those files, is because they were protecting the names of the victims. Well, then they do release files, and the names of the victims are the ones that aren't redacted. It's the names of the rapists and the murderers that are redacted. Are they telling us something, that they think the true victims are the rich and the powerful, and not those young girls that were raped, murdered, and as we found out in the files, eaten? But let's move on here. What's another reason that this stuff could be coming out on the UFO files? Because as I said in the beginning here, word had come out that the White House was talking with leaders of the major Christian churches, telling them that the revelations will shake Christianity to its knees. Not Judaism, not Islam, not Hinduism, not Shintoism, not Zoroastrianism, not Buddhism, just Christianity. You got to wonder if they're saying something like that to Christian leaders, if maybe the UFO file releases the really bad stuff that's probably coming up that they're still working on, they're still writing the scripts for and doing the AI videos over. That's another thing. Yeah, some of the pictures and that stuff that came out with these files, people have figured out are AI created, but were listed as evidence, pictures from decades ago, and people looking at it said that this was AI generated recently. Is the release of the upcoming information a direct attack on the Christian church? But why would Trump do that? A man who has posted memes of himself as Jesus Christ, where his advisors talk about he's a savior sent from God. Why would he attack Christianity? Why would he attack Jesus Christ? I mean, he's a good Christian, we're told. Why would he attack the Christian church? Well, that's another rabbit hole to go down, isn't it? This week, as I've heard these reports, listened to these clips and that type of stuff, read some of the articles online on this stuff before the release on Friday, there's a few things that kept popping into my head. First off, there's the saying in the Christian church, regardless of denomination, it is said that the devil's greatest accomplishment is convincing the world that he doesn't exist. Well, there's another thing that's said in the Christian church also as a counter to that. That the devil's greatest accomplishment isn't convincing the world that he doesn't exist. His greatest accomplishment is convincing the world that God doesn't exist. Does that make you maybe think of these releases in a different light now? That the MAGA savior, who clearly is not MAGA, and he says we're not, but, you know, someone who puts America last and everything, how the hell can you say that they're truly MAGA? I don't consider myself MAGA, not by the standards that they have set for themselves now. I consider myself America first, consider myself a patriot. I'm a U.S. military veteran. I'm a militiaman who's willing to, if needed, answer the call to be that third line of defense to protect this country. Third line being as in your first line is your active duty troops, your second line is your reserves and your National Guard, your third line is the veterans and the militia community. There's more that gets into this. Now, in these reports over this last week, they said that there's one particular alien race that the U.S. government will admit that we have had diplomatic relations with for decades. The particular race that they cite that we will be introduced to in the releases in the coming weeks here is a race that in the conspiracy circles and UFO circles has referred to for decades as the Reptilians or the Reptoids. This is an alien race that arose or was created out of what we know of as reptiles here on Earth. Lizard people is another term I've heard them referred to on or by Art Bell and George Norrie over the years. And yes, I used to listen to Art Bell quite a bit back in the day, especially when I was working security. It was a great program to listen to as you're trying to make it through those long overnight shifts. Now, reportedly, from the alternative media, the reptilians that will be introduced to us, whether they're real or not, who knows? It could be someone in a costume or it could be AI generated. And we'll be told that this is live happening in DC on the Rose Garden lawn or what the hell ever. And the whole thing is staged. Who knows? But we'll be told that they're a benevolent race, that they're here to protect mankind, to better us, to make us wiser, to prepare us to join the international community of the universe or some bullshit. Well, when I heard that, I automatically remembered a little TV show that I watched back in the 80s and I have on DVD. I think it's an extremely good show, and if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. A TV show called V. I'm not talking the remake from the early 2000s. I'm talking the original from the 1980s. Especially the original pilot movie and the miniseries right after that. Now, in the storyline of that, we have alien visitors, as they're called, come to Earth, and they've come to help us advance as a civilization. And they're going to give us, cures for diseases. They're going to give us, huge advancements in knowledge so that we can join the community in the stars. And as we find out in that miniseries, especially as the episodes progress on, that this race, which is lizard people, is reptilians, is reptoids, they're actually here to enslave humanity, package us essentially as MREs for their troops because they apparently do like human meat, and also drain our planet of resources to fuel their war machine as they continue their war of conquest across the universe. We're just a supply stop for them. A mining colony, essentially, with our primary resource to them being our water. Because apparently water is in short supply according to the storyline across the universe. That kind of popped in my head when I heard that the reptilians or the lizard people will be represented to us as benevolent and wise, who are here to advance mankind. Is that true or not? I don't know. I do know from listening to Art Bell and later George Norrie, who replaced him after Art Bell retired. I remember the broadcasts where they talked about lizard people, they talked about reptilians. And UFO researchers said that any cases involving reptilians, the reptilians were always here to hurt humanity. They were evil. Just plain, by any definition, anywhere, they could be classified as evil. And then occasionally, Art Bell and George Norrie would bring in archaeologists and analysts and researchers who, in digs across the Middle East, where they would find carvings or tablets or old papyrus manuscripts, where there are references and drawings of this alien reptilian race, they pointed out that each person who was on, who was was talked to about this stuff and their findings, they said this race was always depicted or shown as enslaving mankind, that they were evil. All this stuff, is popping into my head as I'm hearing these reports earlier this week. And then there's one last thing which I doubt many of you are aware of. There's been a thing that's been going through the UFO community for quite a few years now, where they're now, some of them who actually are Christians or religious, period, have been questioning, is the reptilians or any alien race real? Think about that. Well, if they're not actually real extraterrestrials, where could they be from? How could they do the things that they're cited as doing inside the cases? Well, there's actually a theory that what we perceive as aliens are actually demons who are taking on a disguise to trick us. They're not stupid. I'm sure they know our pop culture better than we do. The movies, the old radio broadcasts, the books. How do you get maximum fear out of a person of little faith who doesn't believe in God, so won't recognize them as evil demons? How about dressing up, disguising yourself as an alien, and violating them? Something to think about, ain't it? Another thing to think about, if we do have a little presentation by the president of our alien visitors, are they truly from outer space? Or are they demons here in disguise to mislead the Christian church, to shake it to its knees? Things to consider. You know, you guys have fun in the discussions, talk about your theories on this stuff. I don't know one way or another if they're real or not. I know they've always been used to distract in the militia community in the past, to distract us from things that our enemies here on Earth, the globalists, are doing. I know that the U.S. government has encouraged the stuff with the UFO movement for decades, going back to World War II, and used that as cover for secret projects. Things like the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter, the B-2 Spirit bomber, before they were unveiled in the Gulf War, whenever they were sighted before that, people were encouraged that those have to be alien spacecraft. Which brings up another thing. What if this alien race shows up and we see through the bullshit and we call lies on this? What if supposedly we have UFOs start attacking us? Start attacking cities. Are we supposed to believe they are extraterrestrial in nature? And not the possibility that these could be actual US military or NATO or Chinese or Russian secret projects, secret, like 7th generation or 8th generation fighters and bombers? And they're using weapon systems that are classified. Things like the particle beam lasers, which they've been using in laboratories since the 1980s. And they've hinted at that they've actually fielded some. I remember in the start of the war on terrorism, early 2000s, press releases from the U.S. Navy talking about how our destroyers and other naval warships starting that year would no longer be, the new ships would not mount conventional cannonry, your 5-inch guns, your 8-inch guns and whatnot on them, that they would now be equipped with rail guns. Something that before that release was science fiction, but here you had the U.S. Navy in an official announcement about the latest developments for naval vessels that was going to be implemented that year. They were going to be installed on naval ships. They were going to start equipping them with rail guns. Rail guns do not expel the projectile from a chemical explosion, an explosion from burning gunpowder. Rail guns accelerate the projectile down the tube, the barrel, or whatever, the rail system, whatever's chosen and used. It's accelerated through electromagnetism, expelling that projectile at ever increasing speeds down the length of that tube until it reaches the end of its tube, and then it continues on that trajectory. That's something that literally 20 years ago the Navy said they were going to start putting on ships, but they have not released pictures of them yet. But they said they were going to start installing those on the ships 20 years ago. So we know there's these types of things that are out there. We know these things exist. So if we do have alien ships that start attacking, are we really supposed to believe they're alien and not secret military projects using weapon systems that were science fiction but actually developed in labs, that they've given us those little hints at, hey, we do have this, we are fielding this now? Something to think about, ain't it? So, things for you to think about as more of these revelations come out about, our benevolent extraterrestrial ambassadors who potentially will be introduced to over the next few weeks or months here in revelations that will shake Christianity to its core, that could see the dissolution of the Christian church. Well, why would it specifically target the Christian church? What about other religions? Things for you to consider. Now, I got stuff I got to get to here at home, and I'm waiting for Combat Cameraman to show up so that we can do some other videos and get some training content posted, finally. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, Essayons.